Welcome to the Darkstream. Vox Day, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. I'm told the audio is good. I'm told the video is good. Unauthorized chat is live. DLive chat is live. And we are rolling. So I was sent an email 2 days ago from someone who was follows a different channel on YouTube, or a channel on YouTube, I should say, since I'm not technically on there anymore. Anyhow, they had some interesting and very gracious things to say, and I will read them to you, which I think you might find moderately interesting if you hadn't seen it already on the blog. But, and I had just posted earlier that day a 2011 interview with John Julius Norwich, the historian that I rather admire, and it just got me thinking about what sort of things that I do are worthwhile and what sort of things are not. And one of the things I decided was that I really want to start doing some more interviews and then getting the transcripts done and putting them up on the blog, because I think they're valuable. It's interesting to get insights from intelligent, accomplished people that actually have something to say, unlike most of the media that I'm commenting on. And there was a really interesting point made by this really good historian named Barbara Tuchman, and she'd put together a set of her essays, ranging from like the 1930s to the 1970s. And one of the things that she said is that looking back at her writing, and she was a reporter and essayist, obviously very elite, from a very elite Jewish family. So she had connections with everything. She would be covering Mao and Kennedy, and she started off with the Spanish Republican War, and so it was. But she's a really good writer. Politics, deeply questionable, but she didn't really write about politics at all. She tended to steer away from that. And it was kind of fascinating to see how she said that she felt that her pieces stood up best that were the most factual, just recounting what happened, and the ones that didn't, and that she didn't even bother including in her book, were the pieces that were more addressing the issues of the day. And I think that's pretty true when you look back at some of the stuff on the blog. A lot of this stuff, we just don't care about. Who cares about George Bush versus, Mitt Romney in the Republican primaries? It's not completely without value, but largely it is. And so then I was kind of in a frame of mind to be thinking about what I was doing when Academic Agent put together this list of his top 10 video essayists. And I was really surprised because these dark streams are not what I would consider to be a video essay at all. There's a fair amount of back and forth interaction. I'm usually just speaking off the cuff. I often don't even have a topic in mind, much less any notes or slides or anything prepared. And then it became clear that he wasn't talking about the Darkstream. He was clearly talking about the Voxiversities. So he says, next person on the list, and again, this is somebody who is still around, but they tend not to do video essays anymore. They tend now to focus on doing streams, although this person's streams are still typically solo and straight to the camera, so they are kind of essay-ish. But that is Vox Day. Now again, he might not be to everybody's cup of tea. You can tell the guy's English. But back in the day, Vox Day made some of the best videos going. So let's have a little watch of one of his. And the video that he showed was the Voxiversity on the Gamma. And obviously, I'm not doing the video editing. That's all the work of my producer partner. So what the guy was really saying was that it was the team of myself and this producer that were effective. And so anyhow, it was also interesting because he played a pretty long clip of it, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and a lot of his audience did not like it. They were definitely reacting negatively to it, which he then commented on after. He said, you get the idea. So I did notice a lot of people kind of instinctively reacted against that. And he's talking to the concept of the gamma. Spud Ruckus says, it's what led me here. Don't know much about you. Didn't know much about you. Had heard of you. Spud Ruckus, are you talking about the academic agent video, or are you talking about the gamma Voxiversity? I'm curious to know. So he said, to me, it's just self-evidently true. It's just obviously true. All of this stuff is clearly, self-evidently, observationally true, and all Vox has done is codified something that exists in the world. It's absolutely right. I mean, you all know this guy. You all know this guy, and if you don't know this guy, or if you're instinctively reacting against it, you probably are that guy. Exactly. Exactly. Okay, well, then thank you, academic agent, and Spud Ruckus, welcome. So in terms of why I have rated Vox, he has a very clear way of articulating himself. He does have this kind of slow speech pattern, but he's quite good at articulating exactly what a concept is, defining it well. I think Vox has some kind of background, whether it's formal or informal. He has some sort of philosophy background. I don't have any philosophy background, but I am extremely well versed in philosophy. If you want to get a good grasp on how well, I strongly suggest you read the debate between me and a philosophy PhD who challenged me on the concept of empiricism and specifically the outlines of Pyrrhonism by Sextus Empiricus. I'm a bit of an autodidact. So anyhow, I seem to remember he has certainly studied ancient rhetoric and so on, so he's quite good at explaining his concept in a very clear way. Vox also has something that I think is an underrated skill, basically, which is coining a phrase. He talks about how he's pretty good at that too. And then he says, his categories here in the psychosexual hierarchy are a good example of it, and you'll casually see these terms used around the place, so that is why I have ranked Vox Day number 6, which frankly, it's just kind to be nominated. So anyhow, that got me thinking. It's like, okay, if we were doing these really good videos that are useful to people that I don't know and I've never heard about before, then it's really something that I should consider doing more of, especially when all the unauthorized people have been saying for years, would you please try to do some more of them? Now, one of the reasons that I didn't bother trying to do much about that, I mean, I did make a few haphazard attempts to do so, talk to a couple possible producers, but to be honest, at the end of the day, I didn't really want to work with anyone else. I know this producer well. He's a friend. We've worked together on projects, some of which have been successful, others of which not so much. Sometimes we've worked together really well. Sometimes we've had a fair amount of conflict and had visions, contradict. But we're always able to resolve it effectively and get stuff done. And so, that's one of the reasons why I hadn't really thought much about it. So what I ended up doing was I called the producer yesterday, and we had a conversation, and I told him, well, I'm thinking about getting back into doing this kind of stuff. Um, and he'd had a pretty significant gig for a couple of years, and I mean very significant. And I knew that he wasn't actively involved in that. I said, are you doing anything that would permit you to, you know, do one or two of these a month? And he said, I'd love to do one or two of them a month. He said, maybe we want to go a little bit lighter on some of the effects and graphics and so forth. And I said, look, I always thought you used too many anyhow. I'm like, you know, I mean, not that I'm a prima donna who wants to be on the screen all the time talking, but there were some videos where I barely appeared at all. I was like, why am I even bothering to deal with all this camera nonsense and all that sort of thing? If all you need is my voice, why can't I just record the audio? So anyhow, it turns out that our revised vision is quite in sync, and so now I still need to get a better camera. I could do it with this camera theoretically. I did do the other ones with it, but if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. We're going to do it well. Raging Zoomer says a Voxiversity on Aristotelian rhetoric would be lit. Don't we already have one on Unauthorized? I'm pretty sure we do. And it might even be on the YouTube. Could someone check and see if there's a Voxiversity on Unauthorized in the Voxiversity channel, or possibly on the Voxiversity YouTube channel? I believe that that's still up. I don't actually know. I haven't looked on YouTube for the Voxiversity channel for years, so it could be completely gone. But anyhow, but so we talked about it, and what we're planning to do. I need to wait, and I'm going to arrange to get a camera. Possibly, I've already got some lights that should be improving this Darkstream soon. If they're sufficient, then that'll be good. And so my goal would be that we would start introducing Voxiversities. I'd start recording them sometime in December, January. And we'd get the first one out in January. One of the Unauthorized guys has anticipated us. He said the Voxiversity that has to be done is about Sigma. That's the first one we're going to do. We already talked about that, and we're definitely going to start with Sigma. We're going to try to keep them on the shorter side. I mean, not like short, but and I don't actually even know exactly what he meant by shorter, but he just meant we're not going to do a big like 12 minute, 15-minute one. We're probably going to be aiming to hit like something in more in the 6-minute range, I would think. All right, we have the first super chat. Thank you, CRE Bear. He actually sent two. Thank you very much. But he said, Vox, requesting Bullfinch's Mythology and additional copies of sold out books for Castelia Library. I would love to do Bullfinch's Mythology. I think it might be necessary to do it in 2 volumes, but we'll have to check. I have a copy, and it's enormous, so we'll have to see. Will it include a new wardrobe of t-shirts? Absolutely not. I don't have any new t-shirts, especially since we lost Ian. I'm pretty much, that's it for me for clothes. I would say the greater part of my wardrobe for the last 4 years has come from crypto fashion. So you're just going to keep seeing these same t-shirts getting rattier and rattier until I'm just here recording with, a few black tatters around my neck. But back to the super chat. Requesting Bullfinch's Mythology and additional copies of sold out books for Castalia Library. Thanks, Vox. We've already printed the second edition missionaries. We need to order new leather, and that's on the to-do list. Meditations we're actually planning to do over here. So we plan to do that here at the bindery. We've got some test meditations that we're going to let people buy that are, let's just say imperfect. The full text is there, the interiors are fine, but we do plan to bring back those books. Also, just as an aside, actually I think I mentioned it, we are going to have Castalia's first Black Friday sale. It's going to run start on the 24th, and we're going to have a better deal on our books than Easton has on most of its. I think we're going to put 4 books on sale, and there'll be a special discount for subscribers, and non-subscribers will be able to purchase books at the subscriber price. So anyhow, it should be a good time to buy Christmas gifts, pick up a copy of the book that you loaned to your brother and didn't get back, as we've heard. So anyhow, that's the plan. So, but yeah, we're going to do that. CRE Bear. Nancy Bear says, I absolutely love Voxiversity. Well, a lot of people have said that, which kind of surprises me, but full credit to the producer. He does a good job of making me look a bit more eloquent. You guys all know better because you watch the Darkstream. But it also helps too that I'm focused specifically on one topic rather than seeing 2 rows of questions coming in at the same time while trying to stay more or less on topic, right? And since we're talking about Castalia Library, I think you guys might enjoy seeing this. We showed the cover on Gab today, and I'm going to show, we just literally finished doing this. The production editor and I literally finished doing this 15 minutes ago. So these are the spines of Castalia History Books 2 and 3, the Cambridge Medieval History Volume 1, the Christian Empire to the 12th Century, and Cambridge Medieval History Volume 2, the 12th Century to the Renaissance. And it was kind of funny because there wasn't quite space to really fit what they had on the original what do you call it, shorter Cambridge Medieval History, and it said the later Roman Empire. And he said, well, could we change it to the Roman Empire? I said, well, we can't just change it to the Roman Empire. It's not the whole Roman Empire, it starts with Constantine. And so then I thought, I wonder what they actually called it on the original 1911 edition, because the shorter edition came out in 1952, quite a bit later, and it was a different group of people at Cambridge at the time. And sure enough, the title of Volume 1 of the 8-volume full Cambridge Medieval History is The Christian Empire. So just like with the Junior Classics, the way they took Christianity out of the Junior Classics with each iteration of, from the 1936 to the 1958 to the 1962, they kept taking the Christianity out, they kept taking the American history out, and we put it back in with our Junior Classics. Well, we're doing the same thing here. Ironically, this title of Volume 1 is more accurate and more respectful of the original than Cambridge's own version, which I think is interesting. So, West by God Bear says the spines look beautiful. Yeah, I think that these are going to be some of our most attractive covers so far. And I'm really happy with the Castelia. I guess I can't make them any bigger. I'm really happy with the Castelia History logo. All of the Castelia History books are going to have going to be denoted by that logo on the top of the spine. And so they still say Castelia Library on them. We're following the lead of Franklin Library in this. It didn't matter what subscription or series it was, science fiction greats, whatever. They always say Franklin Library. So we always want them to say Castelia Library, unless of course they're Libraria books. But we also wanted the history books to stand out in their own way. So that's what we chose. And of course, the Lego ergo scio is a Latin phrase that means I read, therefore I know. And so I think that is certainly an apt slogan for any reader or any publishing company devoted to books and devoted to the good, the beautiful, and the true. So definitely looking forward to getting those out to you guys, and definitely looking forward to getting them onto my shelves. I mean, if you look up, people like a couple of people have said, "Oh, thank you for the super chat." They call me Cordal. He says, "Hail, Dark Lord. Good to see you here." And if you look at the books above me, those 2 rows are all Castelia. And if you notice which books stand out the most, it's the Selenoth books. It's the Arts of Dark and Light, because of the skull on the top. And so I wanted to kind of continue to work off that theme with the Castelia History series, and just do something that was a little bit special and a little bit different than the regular Castelia Library subscription. So so that's good. That worked out surprisingly well. And before I move back to the topic of video, I'm hoping that we will have some very big news about a new book series for the library. That is a series all of you will know, and an awful lot of you will like. And it would be our first non-library series, just totally separate from the subscription. It'll just be a separate subscription for the entire series, and that's it. So it's not too big. It's a good size to try to do something like that with, but hopefully we'll be able to seal the deal next week. So if we do, I will keep you informed. But back to video. What I'd like to hear from you guys is, what are some of the videos that you would like to see? John Bradley, I have no idea what you're talking about. He says, I'm impressed by the 2-color print job on the history books. We're not doing any 2 colors on that. So maybe we got something wrong on there. But no, there's no there's no purple. That's just straight up gold. Oh, I see. No, those little lines that you see. Okay, excuse me a second. We're gonna get a little technical here. The purple you see, those denote where the actual cover ends, and the 3 purple lines across, those denote where the hubs go. So all that is just our basic design, so that we don't put print on top of the hubs. So, but we do have the capacity to do two color, and I think Dracula is going to be the first two color that we introduce. So, Ironworker Bear says more SSH stuff. Okay, I mean, obviously we're going to hit every rank in that. I don't know how much more would be needed. We've already done a general SSH. We've done alpha. We've done gamma. We'll need to do sigma. We'll need to do bravo. We'll need to do delta. And we'll need to do omega. I think there's no need to get into lambda and that sort of thing. Spiderbit wants to hear the topic of how evil in the world reveals the existence of God. That's a good idea. The theosophy of evil. I mean, it's something I've given a lot of thought to. It was really kind of amusing. I had to exert some self-control to resist the urge to critique Megan Rapinoe, whatever her name is, to critique her attempt at a theological critique. Because, I mean, we assume that she considers herself a good person. We consider herself a bad person. But either way, the idea that because a bad thing happened to a good person, that would somehow prove that God didn't exist. But the obvious answer would be that, well, no, you're a bad person and a bad thing happened to you. So therefore, by your own logic, God exists. I mean, there's so many ways that you can go about critiquing that, because at the end of the day, her argument is ultimately because something happened to somebody, God doesn't exist. But something happened to someone is orthogonal to the existence of God. I mean, nobody touched her. If I recall, it was a non-contact injury. So how would the fact of her injury have anything to do with the existence of anyone but herself? This is why you don't turn to excessively political lesbian football players for philosophy or theology. Mentioned above, pick your own damn cotton. Well, somebody else said to you that that's pretty similar to sink the ships. Now, I do think that pick your own damn cotton might be useful if we extend it to include cliodynamics, because I'm reading Peter Turkin's newest book, End Times, right now. Well, it's one of like 3 books I'm reading right now. And it's kind of funny because he's talking about the elites and this and pressure and that. And the one thing that he leaves out, even though he mentions immigration, he mentions it, but he doesn't seem to connect it to his own cliodynamic system. So he doesn't seem to, I stress. I'm not far enough in the book to make an authoritative statement there. But I am on the lookout for him to address that at some point in time. So, I mean, pick your own damn cotton, I think could be an interesting Voxiversity if I can segue from that into some deeper, more significant economic point. Sink the Ships was a little bit different because, if you recall, I wasn't actually doing or saying anything. I was simply reading from the history of Byzantium. So, cross-country trucking, long hauling with the Dark Lord. That would be an interesting one. I could talk about my experiences driving a truck, some of the challenges in maneuvering a very large vehicle up a small and winding mountainside. I think that, that might have to be like a 5-part series, maybe 7. I mean, because if there's one thing that I can just talk about, like Big Bear ranting about the Jews, it's trucking. You know, I mean, who doesn't enjoy a long, involved discussion about long distance trucking? Um, Actually, the funny thing is, I do have this very strange system of entertainment when I'm driving long distances. And I don't know why it works, um, but it does. And, you know, I'm quite good at doing long drives. You know, I used to drive 17 hours and 19 minutes from my home in Minnesota to Bucknell University and back, um, which is really, really exciting when you're driving an MG in high winds, you know. But what I would do is I would calculate, I would do the math on uh, how far ahead or behind of my originally estimated time in arrival was on the basis of, you know, whatever sign that I'd seen. And and so because there was enough, you know, this is before you had any reasonable information or in your car or, you know, anything on Google Maps, etc. And so it was interesting. It wasn't interesting, actually. It was not at all interesting, but I used to enjoy calculating the distance. And then, of course, by the time I managed to calculate exactly the distance, the time, etc., I would have driven far enough that I'd have to do it all over again. And for some reason, that was actually a better way to pass the time than listening to music. So, they call me Cordell sends another super chat. Thank you. He says, a video on Chinese foreign policy or how they run their country would be cool. Okay. I mean, there's an awful lot to talk about with China, both in terms of their history. I mean, you know, one thing that might be really useful in talking about China would be, you know, Chung Kuo or no, which is to say, does China want to rule the world or not? You know, and you know, there's reasons why I don't believe that they have any interest in empire. You know, I don't believe that they have any significant interest in ruling over, you know, other nations. Now, I could be wrong, but there is a considerable, and by considerable, I mean like thousands of years of historical evidence that the Chinese simply don't care. They don't care about other people. They don't want to rule over other people. Now, that doesn't mean that, hey, they're nice guys that you can trust to do what's best for everybody else. That would be completely missing the point. If you've read The Altar of Hate, which is my most recently released book, there's a story called Seven Kill Tiger, which should firmly disabuse you of either that notion or the idea that I might have that notion. You know, the fact that they have no interest in ruling over other people does not mean that they're going to leave those other people to live in peace or even necessarily to exist if they happen to be in the way. You know, I don't think that China has entirely given up its original plan to send 100 million people to Africa. I mean, they already have a lot of people in Africa, but they actually had a plan to essentially colonize the continent. And so, like, a lot of people don't know what the historical designation, the historical self-designation of the Chinese people, or of the Chinese country is. They've referred to themselves as the Middle Kingdom. And the Middle Kingdom does not refer to geography. It means that China is halfway between the earth and heaven. So it's not just the other nations in whom they have no interest. They have no interest in the rest of the world. Not really. You know. And I think that people sometimes mistake the behavior and the attitudes of the diaspora, the Chinese diaspora, for the Chinese people themselves, but it's not the same. And because if there's one thing that the Chinese understand, it's that ruling over the people is a massive, massive pain in the ass. And all of their ideology is completely based around being Chinese. They don't believe that translates. Even their socialism is no longer socialism because it's socialism with Chinese characteristics. And once you add that modifier on there, the modifier becomes significant. Carnaby says that the diaspora in Vancouver are a bunch of shits. Well, I think that the Chinese in China would probably agree with you. I mean, if you think about it, the kind of people that leave are by definition not the norm. And it wouldn't be surprising at all. And it would be a very, very Chinese solution to simply get rid of your troublemakers and send them elsewhere and let them be someone else's problem. You know. Now, I could be wrong. You know, maybe they've learned from the example of the West that the thing to do is to rule over everybody else. But at what point do you see the Chinese attempting to imitate the West in any meaningful way? You know, they don't. You know, it's very much a take what's useful, reject what isn't. And also, what sort of example is the West providing? You know, things have gotten so bad in the United States that people who have immigrated from third world countries are going back because they think that Chicago is a bigger shithole than the country where they come from. Inquisitor Bear said, Chinese are not about to start ticketing the Olam. No, they have no desire to heal the world. You know, all of their rhetoric is about leave us alone, you know, trade with us, let's get along, don't get in our way, everything will be fine. Now, that's partly a problem for, you know, the Chinese, it's partly a problem for the Philippines, maybe the Koreans, but really not for anyone else. Except, of course, the US and the Jews, because they both want to, you know, they still have illusions. Both of those countries still have illusions about ruling over the world. Neither one of them are going to. Call Me Cordell says, I still can't get over their massive fleet they built during the medieval era that they destroyed. Yet, China was the most powerful nation on earth. And not only did they not use that strength, they actually said, you know what, we have this huge navy, but we're just not that interested in the rest of the world, so we're just gonna sink it, get rid of it. I mean, that's pretty much unprecedented in human history. And I also believe that, you know, people say, well, why is China so determined to be strong and why are they so militaristic now and that sort of thing? Well, it's pretty simple. If you look at Chinese history, they have spent a significant portion of it being ruled by other peoples, by the Mongols, by the Manchu, by the French, by the Americans, by the Japanese, by the English. You know, and so you know, there's plenty of good reason for them to need to be strong, just so they can be left alone. So, just something to think about. Obviously, if I do a Voxiversity on it, I will present more detailed evidence and documentation to make my point. I'm just talking off the cuff here. So, Inquisitor Bear says, there really isn't a West to imitate politically. The West does not run the West. I agree. And hasn't for at least 200 years. I do not agree with that. You know, it was interesting reading the, I mean, that's just, you know, that's too long. But I think you could say for about 120 years perhaps. But also the West is not the US. You know, there's more to it than that. Was the Great Wall of China a Roman construction trading road? No. The Great Wall of China was an attempt to keep the Mongols out. It didn't work. Let's see, what else did we have that people were interested in? Since men think about Rome several times a day, more videos on Rome. I mean, we can, but you know, there's already tons of really excellent videos on Rome on YouTube. You know, just the subject of Rome itself, I don't think is really that called for. An evolution debunk would be so useful. Don't we have one on Voxiversity? I could have sworn that we did. Let me see what we got here. So if we go to unauthorized and we click on home, Voxiversity. Okay, here's what we have. Gamma, alpha, rhetoric and dialectic. That would be the one that you want on Aristotle. The sexual hierarchy, Christianity and Western Civilization 1, Christianity and Civilization 2, The Madness of Jordan Peterson. That's a funny one. You should see it. The Last Closet, Dialogue. Oh, that's and Trade War. Those are my two appearances. They weren't proper Voxiversities. Those are my appearances on Chinese state television. Sink the Ships and Immigration and War. So, okay. Yeah, so now we can see what we have. Hawk says the Gary Epi debate is up here somewhere. Yeah, we should put that up too, but I can do better. So we definitely do need to do something on evolution, no question. That'll probably be one of the early ones. Just need to update some of my numbers. I was going to say 500 years to encompass the Reformation and the fall of the monarchies. See, that's not true. That's taking it much too far. Content on classical music would be great. Yeah, one thing we really would like to be able to get done. Unfortunately, our devs are working on something else at the moment, but they will be delivering that classical music channel. And also, another interesting one, an interesting point of fact is that Piero San Giorgio has given us some videos to put up both in French and English on his new San Giorgio channel on Unauthorized, and so we should have that going up, I don't know, perhaps this weekend. And he's, you know Piero, you've seen a couple of our interviews together. One of the things that we're going to do with the new camera and stuff is we're going to set it up so that we can do better, proper interviews at a higher quality. You know, both our own discussions, but also with others. And so that would be good. You know, I mean, as you know, one of our goals is always to continue upping our game. As long as you guys continue to support us, as long as you guys give us the wherewithal to, you know, get better equipment and that sort of thing, we will use it and continue to up our game. You know, it may not seem like it because we haven't added any public features yet, but the infrastructure for unauthorized has been significantly increased and improved over the last year. That's where our focus has been. But in the new year, we're hoping to get back to doing you know, new features, you know, new things, the sort of stuff that the supporters want, that the subscribers want. So your material on religion and war would make a good Voxiversity. Yeah, that's a good one. In fact, I actually finally, after all these years, found the Encyclopedia of Wars in PDF, which is nice. A Voxiversity on the Enlightenment or the French Revolution. Enlightenment would be good. French Revolution, I think Stefan Molyneux has a 9-part series on the French Revolution, so I would definitely defer to him on that one. But, you know, I think that getting into some aspects of military history might be interesting, and especially some aspects of the changes in warfare that we're already seeing, as well as those that are coming in the next 20 years. So, would be cool to have a succinct breakdown of the broken treaties and lies, as well as the parallels in talking about whites being the new Indian. Yeah, I mean, it's really startling. You know, I was really into the Indian stuff, the Indian history, back when I was a kid. When you're growing up in Minnesota, it's a little bit more vivid when you're reading, you know, Little House on the Prairie, when you see where the Sioux rebellion was, and you see the extent of it, you know, and you actually, you know people, you know, like my best friend went to Chippewa Junior High School, and we knew a number of Chippewa Indians. You know, it's kind of funny the way that people act on the internet when you mention that you're part Indian. They always assume that it's you know, it's like the whole you know, what's her name, Elizabeth Warren, and the whole I'm 1/32nd Cherokee, you know. But when you actually know a number of Ojibwe, or you know, you go to school with a couple of Indians, it's not like this imaginary thing, you know. And so it was kind of funny. Like I said, my family history was a little bit messy around the World War II time frame, and my grandfather just refused. My grandfather, who's half Filipino, just refused to tell us what we were. You know, we knew he was half English, half Filipino, but you know, somehow it just like, you know, he would always deflect it and tell us different stories and all this sort of thing. So, you know, we just didn't really worry about it, didn't really care about it. But it was interesting that before we found out, you know, that we were Indian, which tribe, and all that sort of thing, it was kind of funny because one of my brothers would, when he went to college, the American Indian group there kept asking him to join. He kept telling him, I'm not Indian. They're like, yeah, you are. Like, we can see that you are, you know? and it's just amusing. But um, Sam says, "With the same with the Cherokee and Creek down south, every brunette claims to be the granddaughter of a Cherokee princess." That's funny. Yeah, because the whole, I mean, Minnesota didn't even become a state until what, 1858, and so uh, everything is just a little bit, more recent there. Um, and some of the, I mean, I don't think as many of the treaties were broken. Um, I don't think it's an accident that the American Indian movement was founded out there, just because there's a bit more of a presence, and um, and of course they've got all the casinos and stuff, and so they're doing okay now. You know, um, most people can tell. I seem to be able to pick up if a person has Irish or Italian by look. Yeah, I mean, what was fascinating to me is that you know I didn't know. I knew that I was had a fair amount of English, right? Um, but I didn't know uh, about either my American Indian or my Irish ancestry. But what, in retrospect, is interesting is that uh, the the girls that appealed to me most were almost invariably part Scandinavian, which was because of where I lived. I mean, that's that's you've got a bunch of pretty Scandinavians around if you grew up in Minnesota. But um, the ones that the girls I always was most interested in usually had tended to have some Irish or some American Indian. And yeah, I mean, I do remember once when I was like in my early 20s, just thinking, you know, how is it possible that so many of the girls I ask out are, you know, part American Indian? I mean, how many, how many American Indians can there be? Um, and so then after when I found out that that was part of my ancestry, I was like, okay. Uh, the comic Cordo says, maybe if you grew your mohawk back, people would recognize your part Indian side. They would not. And I don't think I can. In fact, I'm quite confident that I don't have enough, it's not thick enough on top to do that anymore. But here's the thing. And you would have thought that it was absolutely obvious, even to my most retarded critics, is when I first mentioned the whole Indian thing, um, there were obviously some people who were skeptical and all this sort of thing. Fine, no problem. I don't look at all. You know, maybe a little bit around the eyes, but that's about it. And but remember, I'm a pretty public figure. I was a syndicated columnist. My picture was in the newspaper every single week in the St. Paul Pioneer Press. You know, um, plenty of people uh, in the city where I grew up, in the area where I grew up, know who I am. They don't maybe follow me closely, but they follow me enough. And not a single person that knew me ever said anything to contradict anything I was saying about my background, right? And the answer for that is really simple. They know my family. They've seen my family. They know what we look like. You know, um, unfortunately, one of my brothers died about a year ago, but uh, my three brothers, when they were young, they were all models, and they they all uh, have the bronze skin and black hair and high cheekbones and all that sort of thing. good-looking guys, really good-looking guys. I was definitely the ugly duckling of the family, and so fortunately I was the oldest. But um, I mean, even when I was a kid, people would say, uh, well, you know, they'd say to my mother, it's a good thing he's yours, because you wouldn't know it to look at him. You know, I look like a miniature version of my dad, more or less. You know, and so, um, it wasn't that uncommon for me to be at, especially if I was like, if my dad wasn't around. If I was with my mom and my brothers, I would occasionally get asked if I was adopted. So, but that's how it is um, when you've got mixed race people. I mean, you've seen um, you know people on the street or whatever. You get some pretty strange combinations at times. Sometimes if the dice fall right, you get exceptionally attractive people. More often, not so much, right? But that's how it works. So, it might amuse some of you if I tell this story. Um, so when we first found out about this, it was one of my brothers. He was kind of into the whole like ancestry thing, and he's the one who figured it all out. And you know, I was a little bit skeptical at first, but um, but then I thought it was fun to go along with it because, of course, why wouldn't you want to annoy your wife, right? So I remember we'd gone out to this like town dinner thing, and I think I prefaced pretty much every sentence with, well, as an Indian, to the point where she was actively kicking me under the table. So she was kind of like, well, I find this, she's like, I don't know if I buy it, blah, blah, blah. But what was funny was that we looked up the tribe on Wikipedia, and you know Wikipedia entries about different tribes, they often have notable individuals. And there was a woman who was a full blood, and uh, you know she wasn't particularly notable, but she was about as notable as we had, and she looked exactly like one of my brothers in drag. I mean, it was one of those things where you're like, oh my goodness. She's like, I can't believe this is real, you know. And it's kind of funny too because there's an actor um, who plays a mixed race, half Indian, whatever character on a show, and he looks exactly like my other brother. And what was fascinating to me from a genetic point of view is that the actor actually has the same mix that we do, and he looks way more like my brother than any of his actual brothers do. So, you know, it's interesting, but yeah, I think talking about the treaties and everything, I think it would be very healthy for a lot of Americans to understand that, you know, uh, a lot of what happened in the settling of the continent was just absolutely, utterly, and completely wrong. Um, and I'm not saying that because I'm part Indian. I'm not saying I feel guilty about it because I'm part English. It's just a fact. You know, I've not only heard all the arguments and justifications, I've used them myself in the past. You know, but at the end of the day, when you've got all these broken promises, broken treaties and stuff, you cannot argue that's justified. When you discovered your ancestry, did you start calling your wife Squaw Bunny? No. No, I did not. So, um, the Leo Frick says the pretty interracial girls are. It says too often the interracial girls are pretty and interracial boys are damaged. I think that totally depends on what mixes you're talking about. I mean, from what I understand, the male Happas often have it very difficult. Um, Whereas the female Happas kind of tend to have the best of both worlds. But that's a pretty Happa specific thing. So, um, but anyhow, on that note, we should bring it to a close. But I'm very pleased that we're going to be able to bring back Voxiversity. I'm glad to hear that so many of you are actively interested in it. And I hope that we'll be able to, what we present to you will be better quality than the Voxiversities that are already out there. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the super chats. I'm Vox Day, and this is the Darkstream.